Our relationship. I think at that point things were coming down on us pretty hard, and we started to look out for each other a lot more. We did 72 of those shows. The CBS network had very tough editorial policies on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Every second was scrutinized. Every word was examined. But on September 17, 1967, something got by. The censors didn't catch it. The director didn't catch it. Not even the brothers themselves knew what was in it until later. During one part of the Who's show, the camera inadvertently picked up something in the background. Something that revealed what everybody knew, but couldn't prove. The Smothers Brothers saga began with tragedy. Their father, Major Thomas B. Smothers, Jr., was an army man. In 1941, in the middle of World War II, he was stationed in the Philippines. When the Japanese invaded, his wife, Ruth, and the two brothers Tom Jr. and Dick were evacuated to safety. Major Smothers was captured by the Japanese. Luckily, he lived through the Baton Death March, in which Japanese guards hit prisoners on the head with batons in a systematic fashion to avoid damaging the uniforms by getting blood on them when disposing of prisoners' bodies on the ground. Later, he was moved to Fukuoka No. 22, a tough camp in Japan. In April, when the war was almost won, he was too ill to work. On April 25th, he was shipped to Korea, but he never arrived. According to some sources, he was put in the ocean until he was an experience package. Others claim he was cremated in Korea. Major Smothers was one of the 110 prisoners transferred with him, yet he was the only one to survive. Ruth was now alone to raise Tom, who was born in 1937, and Dick, who was born in 1938. They grew up in California, where their mother worked long hours. It was tough, and this tough life influenced their comedy for many years to come. The brothers' success in comedy happened in 1959 when they played the Purple Onion in San Francisco, a club so seedy it was in a rundown part of town. The brothers were to perform for only 2 weeks, but they became an overnight sensation, staying for a record-breaking 36 weeks. The crowd was enthralled with their weird combination of folk singing and jokes. One evening, a flamenco dancer broke an ankle. Tom was a folk singer. Tom was a businessman. Tom was indeed an actor. Tom was going to be a dentist. Tom was going to do one thing better than his brothers. Tom was going to make them better. Tom was going to. Hey, did I ever show you what I can do? Get this one in the act. Their producer pushed Tom forward. By this time, Tom was ready. The crowd was amazed by this wild performance. A flamenco dancer takes a bow, and so do Tom and Dick. It was apparent to one and all that they were very special indeed. The Purple Onion had found the two most exciting brothers to turn up in this town in a long time. Expecting to perform by the end of their stint, they were raking in $2,000 weekly. This was just a few months after they were taking home a mere $2 per night. They put out their first album, The Smothers Brothers at the Purple Onion, in 1961. It was their big break. They were performing in a band Tom had formed in college long before Purple Onion. It was called the Casual Quintet. Tom was the guitarist. Dick decided to learn the bass to be in his band. Eventually, the other members drifted away, but the brothers remained committed to their music. They began cracking jokes to pass the time between songs. This was the true beginning of their style. They found they were getting as many laughs for their brotherly jibes as they were for their music. This sibling banter became their trademark. They portrayed the conflict between them as they performed in front of their audience. Tom was the goofy brother. Dick was the straight man. They even staged mock fights and arguments for their audience. "Mom always loved you best," Tom shouted, and the audience roared in laughter. They weren't mugging for the cameras. They naturally acted the way they normally did in life. They were giving their audience the truth about their being, and it was the heartfelt quality of their comedy that people responded to. In the mid-60s, the brothers had an opportunity to take their career to an even higher level. CBS was being slaughtered in the Sunday evening showdown between them and NBC's Bonanza. It was estimated a quarter of all television viewers were tuned into Bonanza. It had already killed off CBS's Harry Mason and The Gary Moore Show. CBS realized they had to think outside the box to regain their audience's interest. They wanted to attract a younger audience. They thought the Smothers Brothers were the answer. They were hilarious, they were intelligent, and they were different. They wanted them to help the CBS station look cool. The Smothers Brothers show premiered in CBS television stations across the country on February 5, 1967. It was just an ordinary television show, or so it seemed at first. Ed Sullivan introduced them to the public in his typical mode, but just a handful of shows later, it was clear that in no way were the brothers typical. They talked about the war in Vietnam in their show. They made light of the politicians they didn't like. They addressed the issues of the day. They were funny, and they were brave. Every week, they pushed the limits, and their audience was enthralled. Within 2 weeks, they were beating Bonanza in the ratings. Young people were watching. Advertisers were delighted. Tom had asked for full creative freedom before they ever started. The network agreed, desperate for a hit show. This gave the brothers the freedom to say whatever they pleased. They booked folk singers such as Pete Seeger, who performed anti-war songs. They mocked President Johnson on television. Each show was a surprise. Each show was a risk. The CBS censors were at their throat every step of the way. The brothers pushed back, incorporating the censorship in each show. The writers were every bit as adventurous as their on-stage guests. Young comedy writers such as Steve Martin, Rob Reiner, Lorne Michaels, and David Steinberg all got their break with this show. These writers were not afraid to take risks in their comedy. Their work would go on to change the future of American comedy as television shows such as Saturday Night Live, All in the Family, and The Mary Tyler Moore Show were modeled after their series. In 1968, something remarkable happened on American television that no television expert predicted. In fact, on October 6th, Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour broadcast the Beatles' promotional film for their new single, Hey Jude. In fact, this was not the first time this promotional film had been shown on television. In this case, it was shown on September 8th in the United Kingdom, a few weeks prior to the Smothers broadcast date. However, this was the first time Americans were allowed to view this type of film. These films were not yet considered videos, but promotional films. The Beatles recorded the song Hey Jude at Twickenham Studios on September 4th. In fact, the set was designed by their own frontman, Paul McCartney. To add to this, a large orchestra performed in white tuxedos to back up their musical performance. In addition, 300 fans were brought in to sing the end in unison. In fact, Ringo Starr, their drummer, had rejoined their fold, having left the Beatles briefly in the past. Thus, this was more than a simple musical performance. Indeed, this event brought excitement to the fans, who still worshipped this musical phenomenon. This, however, was only the beginning. The following week, Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour brought its fans' revolution on television. 2 Beatles videos back-to-back on this series gave their fans in the United States a whole different experience with the Beatles. Other television shows, including even the renowned Ed Sullivan Show, were not able to do this. It was a major change. Music was changing. TV was changing as well. In the year 1967, another major change took place on the same show. Pete Seeger was asked to sing on the show. He had been barred from TV for 8 years. The blacklist prevented him for almost 17 years. When he eventually sang Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, it was a commentary on President Lyndon Johnson's Vietnam policy. CBS censored the song before it went on the air in September of 1967. Tom Smothers did not keep this under wraps either. He made sure the press got the news. The public outcry forced CBS to reinstate Seeger on the show. Finally, on the 25th of February, in the year 1968, millions of viewers got to hear him sing the song uncensored. This was the first time a blacklisted artist dared challenge a president so blatantly. The Smothers Brothers Comedy Show also provided a platform to those bands that no television network would play. They included The Who, The Doors, Jefferson Airplane, Buffalo Springfield, and Steppenwolf between the years of 67 and 69. These bands did not make the cut for regular TV. The Who ended their show with destroying their equipment and exploding bombs inside drummer Keith Moon's drum kit. This caused damage to guitar specialist Pete Townshend's hearing and shredded the walls with shards of metal. The Doors performed the song Touch Me before an orchestra. Jefferson Airplane sang Crown of Creation, about the fear of nuclear war. Buffalo Springfield performed For what it's worth, and Stephen Wolf's Born to be Wild brought the rebellious spirit to the American living room. The Smothers Brothers did not mind being conservative for the network either. They wanted to give the rebellious artists a voice on the show. This gesture was appreciated with cash reward for the biggest names of rock music. On the 26th of April, in the year 1969, at the Los Angeles Forum, Hendrix paused before starting his show and dedicated his performance to the Smothers Brothers. He thanked them for giving him the chance to integrate art and protest on TV. He was on the top of the ladder. He also had just been pulled out of his show Ricks, due to it becoming too rebellious for CBS television. The Who, in particular, delivered their music and message on its own, in its own special way, blending music and comedy in perfect harmony, with humor, too, he said on stage. A perfect example of this blending was in an ongoing skit called Share a Little Tea with Goldie. Goldie O'Keefe, portrayed by actress Lee French, was a spaced-out hippie who dispensed crazy advice, full of double entendres. Tea, of course, meant marijuana, or weed for short. Goldie Keefe, Goldie's name before it was changed, was hashish, a hash mark, or marijuana mark, a slang expression for pot or marijuana, hash, or hashish. The censors forced them to change it, but most viewers in their living rooms sensed what was happening here. Goldie talked about roaches, for example, and nobody thought they really meant what they said. Younger viewers especially appreciated the jokes in a special way, since it was all wink, wink in their faces, too. All in all, Goldie became a cult favorite, even under network observation, since they watched all things happening on their show very closely. Keith Moon, in his short lifetime, never was one to back off in any situation in which he found himself in, on, or under the limelight, either in or out of The Who. When he appeared on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, consisting of his set in front of millions on The Who, on September 17, 1967, he had other, much better, fish to fry, too. They were set to perform My Generation, for which they would produce more than enough fireworks in their finale, too, in order to leave all in attendance in their show's final blow, mesmerized for a lifetime, too, in a neat, compact package of nuclear blast, unparalleled in its safety, since he, Moon, once again, had sneakier fireworks up his special sleeve for this occasion, too, to blow their audience away, too, with one blow, in My Generation, too, especially when he removed all explosive from his kick drum before starting, and filled it up instead with much more, enough explosives to blow them all away, literally, too, since he, Moon, had up his special sleeve, sneakier, more, enough fireworks, in one compact package, too, for one special purpose, too, to perform in front of all in attendance in order for them to leave all in attendance in their show's final blast, mesmerized, for a lifetime, too. This all went off according to Moon's own special, sneakier, more, enough fireworks, sneakier, too, since he, Moon, had set up in his special, sneakier, more, enough fireworks, sneakier, too, in one compact package, too, to perform My Generation, too, in their show's finale, too, in front of all and years later. Townshend was still talking about the pain and the way that playing the guitar was becoming harder because of that injury. It was a moment that nobody would ever forget and one that changed the way they performed from that day on. But then came the guitar. In the smokescreen and madness, Townshend grasped Tom Smothers' acoustic guitar and smashed it on stage. Smothers simply stood there in shock. He was so bewildered that he could hardly get out any words. It was like the perfect end to the mayhem. A loud and wild gesture that showcased what The Who were all about. The Who were pushing at every boundary that nobody had ever dared cross before. This explosion and the smashing of the guitar made headlines. It was the start of a part of rock history that people can still remember today. Young people were loving it. The older generation was fuming. The performance was giving Americans something wild, something that was pure and real. Parents were disgusted by the performance. Kids thought that it was liberating. It was nothing less than a true generation split. This was what The Who and the Smothers Brothers performance was all about. Nothing was ever going to be the same. Joan Baez was also stirring the pot. Joan Baez was a folk singer. Baez was for peace and social justice. Everyone knew that. Born on January 9, 1941, Baez was born on Staten Island being part of the state of New York. Baez had dedicated a whole life to fighting for the causes that she believed. Even by 1967, Baez was already one that was known for being arrested while she was out there helping with protests. Even her songs were about people looking for change. Baez was about to make her first big performance on the Comedy Hour for the Smothers Brothers. This time, Baez was about to dedicate her performance to her husband, David Harris. David was about to be sent away for 3 years for refusing the draft. Baez was proud of her husband. Baez made sure that everyone knew she was on her husband's side. However, CBS only recorded Baez saying something vaguely relating before she even sat down and sang. Baez's message was only one sign that CBS was feeling pressured. CBS knew that they were taking a lot of risks. CBS was scared that they were upsetting the government and one angry sponsor. Even President Lyndon B. Johnson was complaining about the performance. Johnson stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning. They tried to call CBS and tell them to control the Smothers Brothers. Nixon then followed up and demanded that they remove the Smothers Brothers from the air. They had already lined up Harry Belafonte to appear on the program. They put together a great act. Harry would sing Lord, Don't Stop the Carnival, and they would have footage of the police breaking up protesters against the Vietnam War during the Democratic Convention in Chicago. It was a bold move. It was real. It was relevant. They then removed the whole segment from the program before it could air. Of course, that was not the end of the matter. They then sold the 5 minutes that had originally been removed to the Republican Party to be used as campaign ads. This program that had set out to make a statement regarding the violence used by political figures had turned into an advertisement for the very people that were being attacked. It had become clear that the broadcast network stood behind the political figures. By the end of 1968, the Smothers Brothers found themselves under a great deal of pressure. They had found out that CBS had a new policy of vetting every script that went to air and every videotape that the brothers wanted to air. This was not just a simple overview. They had sensors that disassembled every word. They searched every episode